Empty stomachs, desperate mothers, children eating grass from graveyards. This was Japan during World War II. While soldiers fought on distant islands, families back home fought a different battle, the battle against starvation. Rice disappeared, fish vanished, sugar became a memory. Yet somehow, Japanese families survived on foods that would shock you today. Tree bark soup, grasshopper powder, even silkworm cocoons. These weren't exotic delicacies. They were the difference between life and death. Today, we're uncovering what Japanese people actually ate during the darkest days of World War II. And trust me, some of these will make you grateful for your next meal. 1. Substitute rice, the five-color mix. White rice was Japan's soul food, the foundation of every meal, until it wasn't. By 1944, pure white rice had become a ghost, a memory of better times. What replaced it? Something called five-color rice. White rice mixed with yellow old rice, green beans, red grains, and brown insects. Yes, insects. Imagine opening your rice bowl and finding beetles mixed with grain. Not by accident, by design. The government called it nutrition. Families called it survival. Each color represented a different substitute, a different compromise. Old rice that had yellowed with age, beans to add bulk, mystery grains that no one questioned too closely. And those insects, protein, they said, just close your eyes and chew. The psychological impact was crushing. Rice wasn't just food in Japan. It was identity, tradition, comfort. Watching it transform into this mongrel mixture broke spirits as much as it filled stomachs. Mothers would pick out the worst bits for themselves, leaving the few white grains for their children. Small acts of love in desperate times. 2. Pumpkin everything. When rice failed, pumpkins stepped in, not as a side dish, as the main event. Pumpkin rice, pumpkin porridge, pumpkin flour. By 1943, these orange gourds weren't seasonal decorations, they were survival itself. The government pushed pumpkins hard, easy to grow, hardy, filling. Magazines printed endless pumpkin recipes, trying to make monotony palatable. Housewives learned to grate pumpkin into rice to stretch rations, dry it into flour for fake bread, boil the skin for soup. Even the seeds became precious. Roasted when oil disappeared. But here's what they didn't print in those cheerful magazines. Eating pumpkin 3 times a day, every day for months. It changes you. Your skin takes on an orange tint. Your body rebels. Children developed what doctors quietly called pumpkin sickness, constant stomach pain from the endless orange diet. Yet what choice was there? Pumpkin or starvation? Japan. 3. Ultimatum, whale meat everywhere. This took place on May 30th, 1894. Before the war, whale was working class food. During the war, it became the only meat many Japanese would see for years. Tough, oily, with a distinct smell that announced itself before it reached the table. But it was protein when protein meant survival. Restaurants that once served beef now offered whale steaks. School lunches featured whale stew. Families learned to soak whale meat in ginger water to kill the smell. Slice it thin to make it chewable. Mix it with anything to mask the taste. Whale bacon, whale sausage, whale everything. The irony wasn't lost on anyone. Japan, an island nation famous for its seafood, reduced to hunting giants of the deep while regular fish disappeared. Fishing boats had been conscripted for war, fishermen drafted. The seas around Japan, once teeming with life, now swarm with American submarines. So, Japan ate whale and pretended it was choice rather than necessity. 4. Grasshopper powder. In 1945, the radio announced a new protein source, grasshoppers. Not as a delicacy, as a directive. Schools sent children into fields with bags. Their mission? Collect grasshoppers for the national diet. Each child had a quota. Fill your bag or explain why you failed the war effort. The insects were dried, ground into powder, mixed into whatever food remained. The government called it nutritious protein supplement. Children called it punishment. The powder turned everything gray. The taste? Like eating dirt mixed with bitterness. But it had protein, calcium, vitamins. Science said so. Empty stomachs didn't argue with science. Some regions went further. Silkworm pupae from the silk industry. Bee larvae. Anything with protein that crawled, flew, or squirmed. Traditional insect foods existed in Japan before the war. But tradition was one thing. Desperation was another. When your choice is grasshopper powder or watching your children waste away, you learn to swallow pride along with insects. 5. Substitute coffee from sweet potatoes. Coffee vanished early, a Western luxury Japan could no longer afford. But the ritual of morning coffee, that died harder. So Japanese ingenuity created substitutes. Sweet potatoes, sliced thin, roasted black, ground into powder. Add hot water, pretend. The process took hours. Precise roasting to avoid bitter charcoal. Grinding by hand when machines broke. The result looked like coffee, smelled vaguely similar, tasted like burnt sweet potato water. But it was hot, dark, and came in a cup. Sometimes the ritual mattered more than the reality. Other substitutes emerged. Roasted barley, burnt rice, dandelion roots. Each family had their recipe, their method of pretending morning was normal. Fathers sipped these strange brews before work, maintaining dignity through routine. The taste reminded them of loss. The warmth reminded them of hope. 6. Sawdust bread. By 1945, flour was memory, but people still craved bread. Enter sawdust bread, not a metaphor. Actual sawdust, mixed with whatever grain remained, baked into something resembling bread. The government called it wood flour. Bakers called it desperation. The recipe was simple. 1 part flour if you had it, 2 parts sawdust from specific trees. Not all wood was equal. Pine was bitter, oak was better. Mix with water, pray, bake. The result? Dense, woody, barely edible. But it filled stomachs. It looked like bread. Children could pretend. Bakers wept making it. This wasn't their craft, their art. This was survival theater. But they made it anyway. Because something that looked like bread gave people hope. Even if that hope tasted like trees and stuck in your throat. Even if it caused stomach pain that lasted days. It was bread-shaped, and sometimes shape was all that mattered. 7. Wild plant soup. Parks became buffets. Roadside weeds became vegetables. By 1944, organized groups of women and children foraged through cities, guided by government pamphlets on edible plants. Dandelions, plantain, clover. Things formerly called weeds, now called dinner. The knowledge came from rural grandmothers who remembered famine foods. Which plants killed? Which plants fed? Which plants fell somewhere between? Mugwort for vitamins. Bracken ferns for bulk. Wild onions for flavor. Pine needles boiled for vitamin C. Every green thing scrutinized, tested, consumed. But cities weren't forests. Plants grew where they could. Cemetery grass. Roadside weeds soaking up military vehicle exhaust. Parks fertilized with human waste when chemicals vanished. The soup made from these plants tasted exactly like what it was. Desperate people eating desperate things. But it was green, it was vitamins, it was one more day survived. 8. Acorn flour. Acorns had fed Japanese peasants through historical famines. Now they fed everyone. Gathering parties spread through forests each autumn. Children competed to fill baskets. Every acorn meant calories. Every calorie meant survival. But acorns aren't simple food. Raw, they're bitter with tannins, poisonous in quantity. The preparation took days. Shelling, grinding, soaking in stream water to leach out toxins, drying, grinding again into flour, mix with whatever real flour remained, bake into dense nutty cakes that sat heavy in stomachs. The taste was earthy bitter despite processing, the texture gritty. But acorn flour stretched real flour, made one bag into three, fed 3 mouths instead of one. Mothers learned to hide the bitterness with precious sugar when they had it. When they didn't, children learned that bitter was better than hungry. 9. Soybean everything. Soybeans saved Japan. When rice disappeared, soybeans remained. Tough, versatile, protein-rich. The government pushed soybeans like salvation. Soybean rice, soybean flour, soybean coffee, soybean meat. If it existed, someone made a soybean version. The black American tofu production exploded. Not the silky tofu of peacetime. Wartime tofu was dense, grainy, stretched with fillers. But it was protein. Miso paste became currency. A thumbnail of miso might be a day's flavoring. Families guarded their miso crocks like treasure, which they were. The soybean diet had consequences. Constant gas. Digestive problems, children complained of stomach aches, adults complained of monotony. But soybeans grew when rice paddies failed, survived when vegetables died, fed millions when nothing else could. Japan ate soybeans and survived, complained and survived. That was enough. 10. Dried fish powder. Fresh fish disappeared with the fishing fleet. What remained? Tiny dried fish, anchovies mostly, ground into powder, sprinkled on everything. The ghost of seafood haunting every meal. 1 tablespoon of fish powder supposedly equaled a serving of fish. Mothers became magicians, making powder into presents, mixed into rice, stirred into soup, pressed into cakes. The smell was intense. The taste, concentrated ocean. Children held their noses. Mothers insisted. Calcium, protein, health. The powder came in precious packets, rationed like gold dust. Black market prices soared. Families saved it for children, for sick days, for celebrations. A sprinkle of fish powder on New Year's rice, pretending abundance through essence. The Japanese diet, once rich with fresh seafood, reduced to powder in memory. 11. Bamboo shoots and roots. Bamboo grew wild. Free food for those who knew where to look. Spring meant bamboo shoot hunting. Families woke before dawn, racing to secret spots. First come, first served. The shoots were tough, bitter, needed processing, but they were free. They were filling. They were hope pushing through earth. Beyond bamboo, other roots fed the desperate. Lotus roots from pond mud, burdock from roadsides, taro from abandoned gardens. Each required knowledge. Which roots poisoned? Which roots nourished? Which roots fell between? Grandmothers became libraries of survival knowledge. Their memories meant life or death. The preparation was labor intensive. Digging, cleaning, soaking, boiling. More soaking, more boiling. Hours of work for minutes of eating. But time was what people had. Food was what they didn't. So they dug, processed, survived on roots their ancestors ate in famines past. 12. Kelp and seaweed soup. The ocean's vegetables remained when its fish disappeared. Kelp, wakame, nori. Anything that grew in saltwater and filled stomachs, coastal communities had advantages. Rocky shores meant food. Low tide meant foraging. Children learned to read tides like textbooks. Seaweed soup became standard. Thin, salty, more water than substance. But it was hot. It contained minerals. It tasted of the sea. Japan could no longer fish. Mothers stretched single sheets of nori across multiple meals, crumbled over rice, dissolved in soup, teaching children to chew slowly, make it last. The iodine was too much for some. Thyroid problems developed. Doctors worried quietly. But what alternative existed? Seaweed was free. Seaweed was available. Seaweed was survival. Japan, surrounded by ocean, ate the ocean's plants. and remembered when they ate its fish. 13. Mountain vegetables. Cities starved first. Mountain villages survived longer. They knew secrets, where wild vegetables grew, when to harvest, how to preserve. City relatives begged for knowledge. Mountain grandmothers became teachers of survival. Grabby ferns in spring, wild mushrooms in fall, mountain herbs year-round. Each season brought different foods for those who knew, but knowledge came with risk. Wrong mushroom meant death. Wrong preparation meant poison. Desperation made people reckless. Hospitals saw poisoning cases rise. Hunger clouded judgment. The mountain diet was monotonous but sustainable. Preserved vegetables lasted through winter. Dried mushrooms added flavor to nothing soup. Wild herbs made sawdust bread tolerable. Mountain communities shared knowledge, shared food, shared survival. Their ancestors had lived through famines. Now that knowledge saved cities. 14. Substitute sugar from vegetables. Sugar vanished early. Luxury item, military priority. Children forgot sweetness, adults craved it. Innovation filled the gap. Sweet potatoes, cooked down to syrup. Pumpkins, reduced to paste. Beets, when available, processed for sugar. Anything sweet became precious. The process was exhausting. Hours of cooking for tablespoons of sweetness. Fuel was scarce. Time was all people had. Mothers spent days making syrup for one birthday cake, using magazines as fuel, 20 pages for a cup of heat. Sweetness cost more than money. It cost effort, fuel, hope. Hoped and born during the war didn't know real sugar. Their sweet was vegetable sweet, different, less, but sweet enough for bodies that knew nothing else. A spoonful of sweet potato syrup was celebration, a luxury in a world without luxuries. Sweetness carved from vegetables through sheer determination. 15. Bark soup and pine needle tea. When everything else failed, trees remained. Inner bark from pines, young bark from elms, stripped carefully to not kill the tree. Tomorrow's meal grew on today's trunk. The bark was processed like acorns, dried, ground, boiled into soup that tasted like eating forest floor. Pine needle tea provided vitamin C, prevented scurvy when fruit was fantasy. The taste was medicinal, turpentine and bitterness, but it was hot. It was vitamins. It was something when nothing else remained. Children learned to hold their breath and swallow. Adults learned to be grateful for trees. This was endpoint eating. When bark soup appeared, everyone knew how bad things were. No pretense remained. No substitutes for substitutes. Just humans eating trees to survive another day. The recipes came from ancient famines, history repeating in modern times. Japan survived on foods that weren't foods. Survived to tell the story. Survived to ensure it never happened again. The war ended in August 1945, but the hunger continued into 1946, 1947. Recovery was slow. Memories were permanent. A generation grew up knowing hunger intimately, knowing that grass could be food, that bark could be soup, that survival required eating anything, everything, nothing. They carried that knowledge forever. Made sure their children never knew that hunger, never needed to know which weeds were edible, never had to grind grasshoppers into powder. The foods that saved Japan during World War II weren't foods at all. They were desperation made edible. Survival disguised as sustenance. Love measured in shared suffering. A nation that ate trees and insects and sawdust, and lived to rebuild, to remember, to ensure such hunger never returned.